Welcome to a deep dive into AI and data. You shared a report with us called Trustworthy Artificial Intelligence 2025. And it got us thinking about some pretty big questions like what if there's not enough data to power all these incredible AI advancements we're all expecting?
Could we hit a wall?
Yeah, exactly. Like, is there a data shortage on the horizon?
Well, it's a crucial question, especially when you consider just how much data AI needs. We're talking a projected 221 zettabytes of data by 2026.
221 zettabytes.
Yeah,
I don't even know what that means.
that's enough to store 110 trillion movies.
Okay, that's a lot of movies, but the report makes it clear that it's not just about how MUCH data we have, but the quality of the data,
Right.
especially when you're talking about specialized AI applications.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Like, everyone has access to ovens, right?
Sure.
But it's a chef's unique ingredients and recipes that make their dishes special.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The report really underscores how unique, high-quality data could become a major advantage as AI becomes more commonplace. Companies that have access to accurate, specialized data will be the ones to watch.
So it's almost like data is the new secret ingredient.
In a way, yeah.
That's so interesting. The report actually has this real-world example of just how much damage bad data can do. Apparently, there was a real estate company that lost over $500 million
Oh,
because their AI was making bad predictions
oof.
based on inaccurate data.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about that case is it wasn't some huge mistake in the data itself. It was
Okay.
more about relying too heavily on historical data without considering those little local market differences.
So even small inaccuracies can snowball into huge financial losses,
Exactly. Yeah.
especially as AI gets more integrated into things like finance and healthcare.
Absolutely. The report emphasizes how crucial it is to have accurate, unbiased, and complete data for AI to work, especially in high-stakes fields. If you're using AI for medical diagnoses, you can't have bad data influencing those recommendations.
And that brings us to the idea of trustworthy AI, which is at the heart of this report, right?
Right.
Companies, especially those dealing with sensitive data, are realizing they need to be more transparent about how their AI uses that data.
The report actually highlights LSEG, a company that deals with huge amounts of financial data. They've developed these responsible AI principles to ensure the accuracy, reliability, and transparency of their AI systems.
So basically, they're trying to build trust by showing they're using data responsibly,
Exactly.
which makes sense in a sector like finance, where trust is everything.
Precisely. And one of the coolest things they're exploring is this idea of data passports.
Data passports.
Yeah. Think of it like a global rule book for sharing data safely,
Okay.
almost like an internet protocol, but
Yeah.
for data.
Got it. So like a certificate of authenticity for your data that verifies its source and any restrictions.
Yeah, exactly. That could be huge for building trust in a world where data is constantly being shared. But this report also points out some concerns about how freely data can move around the world.
Right.
It talks about how the increasing value of data has led to more barriers, like data localization laws, which restrict how data can be transferred across borders.
And that creates headaches for companies that operate globally.
It does. The report actually uses Airbus as an example.
Oh, yeah.
They're gathering tons of data from their A350 aircraft, but restrictions on data flows could make it harder for them to analyze that data and improve their planes.
That's a good example of how these data localization laws can stifle innovation.
And it's not just data localization. There's a whole mishmash of data regulations popping up around the world. The EU's GDPR, China's Personal Information Protection Law, and the US's patchwork of privacy laws, for example.
That's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
And it must make it really hard for companies trying to develop AI solutions that can work in different countries.
It does. It's like navigating a maze with moving walls.
The report does mention some initiatives aimed at finding some common ground, though. Like, what's this data-free flow with trust thing? DFFT? I'm not totally clear on how that works.
Here, think of DFFT as an attempt to build a global data highway.
Okay.
It's about establishing a common set of principles and standards for how data moves across borders, making sure privacy and security are built in.
So instead of every country having its own data rules, it'd be more like a universal language that everyone understands.
Precisely. That would make it easier for companies to develop AI globally without having to navigate all these conflicting regulations.
Yeah.
The OECD and G7 are both big supporters of DFT,
Yeah.
and they're working on practical frameworks that can be used internationally.
So there is hope for a more unified approach to data governance then.
It's definitely a positive step,
Mm.
but the report also recognizes that we're living in a time of heightened geopolitical tension,
Right.
which can make global cooperation tough.
That's true. I guess it comes down to whether countries are willing to prioritize the benefits of AI over concerns about data sovereignty.
Exactly.
Ah.
The report argues that the stakes are high, and we need to find a way to balance those competing interests if we want to unlock the full potential of AI.
Which is huge,
It's
right?
huge.
I mean, from healthcare to climate change, AI could help us solve some of the biggest challenges we face.
Absolutely. But to get there, we need to build AI on a foundation of trustworthy data. And that goes beyond just following the rules.
Hmm.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we think about data itself.
So instead of seeing data as just another commodity, we need to treat it as a valuable resource that needs to be managed responsibly.
Exactly. The report uses a really interesting analogy to illustrate this point.
What's that?
It compares the current state of data governance to the tragedy of the commons.
Oh, right, like overfishing or deforestation.
Exactly. Where individual actions, when multiplied, can have devastating consequences for everyone.
And without global cooperation, we risk creating a data commons where data is unreliable and ultimately less valuable.
Exactly. So what can we do to avoid this? Well, DFFT is a big part of the solution. It's about ensuring data can flow freely across borders while still protecting privacy and security.
Finding that balance is going to require a lot of collaboration between governments and businesses, right?
Absolutely. And the report highlights some promising examples of these collaborations, like the UK-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement or the USMCA. These agreements could be models for other countries,
So there are signs the collaboration is possible.
definitely. But the report also stresses the importance of creating data-sharing ecosystems that go beyond just data transfers. It's about finding ways to collaborate on data analysis, AI development, and even the creation of new data-driven products and services.
Because ultimately, data is most valuable when it's used to generate insights and drive innovation.
Exactly. And that's where things get really exciting. The report points to some really interesting ways businesses are already innovating in the data space. Remember those data passports we talked about earlier?
Yeah, those sounded pretty cool.
Hmm.
Tell me more about how they might work in practice.
Well, imagine a future where every piece of data comes with its own passport, a digital certificate that verifies its source and any restrictions. This would make it so much easier for businesses to share data safely and confidently, knowing they're following the rules and respecting privacy.
So it's like giving data its own ID card, a digital fingerprint.
Exactly. And that's a game changer in a world where data is becoming more and more complex and valuable.
This is all really fascinating stuff, but I have to admit, it's a lot to take in.
I understand. It's a complex landscape and it's constantly evolving.
Mm.
But I think the main takeaway is that data governance isn't just a technical issue anymore. It's a societal one
Hmm.
with huge implications for our future.
So what does this mean for someone like me who isn't a data scientist or a policymaker?
It means we all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI and data. As consumers, citizens, and professionals, we need to be informed about how our data is being used and advocate for responsible data governance practices.
That's a powerful thought. It makes me realize that this isn't just some abstract concept, it's something that affects all of us.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations to explore the complexities of the data-driven world and to think critically about the choices we're making today that will shape our future.
Well said. It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this topic,
Yeah.
but I already have a much better understanding of the relationship between AI and data and the
Yeah.
challenges and opportunities ahead.
It's been great discussing this with you. Remember, this is an ongoing conversation, and the landscape is constantly changing. But by staying informed, we can all help ensure that AI and data are used to create a better future for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure. And to you, our listener, I hope this has given you some new ideas and inspired you to think more critically about the role of data in our increasingly digital world. It's setting up international trade agreements, but for data instead of physical goods.
Interesting. So instead of every country having its own set of data rules, DFFT would be like a common language everyone can understand.
Exactly. And that would make it so much easier for companies to develop and use AI solutions around the world without having to constantly navigate all those different regulations. The OECD and the G7 are both really into DFFT,
Okay.
and they're working on creating these practical frameworks that can be adopted globally.
So there's hope for a more unified approach to data governance.
It's a step in the right direction for sure. But the report does acknowledge that we're living in a time of increased geopolitical tension,
Yeah, true.
which, it can make global cooperation a little tricky.
That's a good point. I guess it comes down to whether countries are willing to put the potential benefits of AI above their concerns about data sovereignty.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the report makes the case that the stakes are really high.
Hmm.
We need to find a way to balance those competing interests if we want to really unlock AI's full potential.
And that potential is huge.
Huge, yeah.
From revolutionizing healthcare to tackling climate change, AI could help us solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But to get there, we need to build AI on a foundation of trustworthy data.
right?
And that means going beyond just complying with regulations.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental shift in how we think about data.
So instead of seeing data as just something to be bought and sold,
Yeah,
we need to start treating it as a valuable asset that needs to be managed responsibly.
precisely. And the report uses this fascinating analogy.
Mm.
It compares the current state of data governance to the tragedy of the commons.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah,
Like overfishing or deforestation?
exactly.
Hmm.
When a shared resource is overused, everyone ends up losing, and without international cooperation and coordination, we risk creating a data commons where data is fragmented, unreliable, and ultimately less valuable for everyone.
So what can we do to prevent that from happening?
Well, DFFT is definitely a big part of the solution. Like we said, it's about finding ways to ensure that data can flow freely across borders while still maintaining those safeguards for privacy and security.
Sounds like finding that balance will require a lot of collaboration between governments and businesses.
Absolutely. And the report actually highlights some promising examples of these types of collaborations,
Mm-hmm.
like the UK-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement or the USMCA.
Oh, okay.
They could be models for other countries trying to strike that balance.
So there are some positive signs that collaboration is possible.
Definitely. But the report also emphasizes that it's important to create these data-sharing ecosystems that go beyond just basic data transfers.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to collaborate on data analysis, AI development, and even creating new data-driven products and services.
That makes sense. Data is most valuable when it's actually used to generate insights and drive innovation. Right.
Precisely. And that's where things get really exciting. The report highlights some really interesting ways companies are already innovating in the data space. You remember those data passports we were talking about?
Yeah, those sounded interesting. Tell me more about how they might actually work in the real world.
Okay, so imagine a future where every single piece of data comes with its own passport, a digital certificate
Hmm.
that verifies its authenticity, where it came from, and any restrictions on its use. This would make it so much easier for businesses to share data securely and confidently, knowing they're complying with regulations
Yeah.
and respecting privacy.
So it's like giving data its own verifiable ID, like a digital fingerprint.
Exactly. And that's a total game changer in a world where data is becoming increasingly complex and valuable.
This is all really fascinating, but I have to admit, it's a little overwhelming trying to wrap my head around all these different initiatives and ideas.
I get it. It's a complex landscape
Mm-hmm.
and it's constantly evolving. But I think the key takeaway here is that data governance isn't just a technical issue anymore. It's a societal one
Right.
with huge implications for our future.
So what does this mean for someone like me, who isn't necessarily a data scientist or a policymaker?
Well, it means that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI and data.
Mm.
As consumers, as citizens, and as professionals,
Right.
we need to be informed about how our data is being used
No.
and advocate for responsible data governance practices.
That's a powerful thought. It makes me realize that this isn't just some abstract concept. It's something that really affects all of us. It absolutely does. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to explore these complexities of this data-driven world, and to think critically about the choices we're making today that will shape our future. Well said. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic, but I already have a much deeper appreciation for how important data is in the age of AI. You've given me a lot to think about. It sounds like we're at this crossroads where the decisions we make about data governance now will have a big impact down the road.
Absolutely. And those decisions aren't just being made in boardrooms or government offices. They're happening at the individual level, too.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, every time you accept a cookie policy online or change your privacy settings on
Yep.
social media,
Right.
you're making a choice about how your data is used.
So it's not just about companies and governments, it's about all of us being more aware of our own data, huh?
Exactly. We need to move beyond just clicking accept and really start thinking about how our data is being collected, shared, and used.
It's true. I know I'm guilty of just blindly accepting those cookie policies without really understanding what I'm agreeing to.
We all do it.
Right.
But the more we understand about data, the better equipped we'll be to make informed choices and advocate for policies that protect our privacy while still allowing for innovation.
So knowledge is power when it comes to data.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to that question you asked earlier. If data is the new oil, who controls the pipelines in the age of AI? The answer, at least in part, is all of us.
Hmm.
We have a shared responsibility to shape the future of data governance and make sure it benefits everyone.
It's a lot to consider, but I really appreciate you breaking it down for me. I feel like I have a much better grasp of the connection between AI and data and all the challenges and opportunities that come with it.
It's been great chatting with you about all this. Remember that this is an ongoing
Mm.
conversation and things are changing all the time. But by staying informed and engaged, we can all do our part to ensure that AI and data are used to build a better future for everyone.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure. And to you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked some new ideas and encouraged you to think more critically about the role of data in our increasingly digital world.